Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver.
Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. We are in the middle of our Shocktober mini-series, in which we are covering a whole range of horror-related items, new releases and old, in the build-up to Halloween. This week, we are going to be discussing Gareth Evans' Apostle, which dropped on Netflix a couple of weeks ago. Just missed the boat in terms of covering it for the folk horror series, annoyingly. And I've had a lot of tweets and correspondence of people asking if we're going to cover it, so here we go. We're going to be talking about the movie, as usual with new releases, in spoiler-free detail initially, and then we'll go into spoilers in the second half of the podcast, and we will give you a warning in advance. So joining me to discuss all things Apostle, she's back on the podcast once again, one of my very favourite people. It is my great pleasure to welcome Louise Blain. Louise, hello.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good.
This is an exciting time of year for us. We've just been saying this off mic, but October. You know, are you a big fan of sort of this time of year, of Halloween in general?
This is our Christmas,
It
Mike.
really is,
This
isn't
is
it?
absolutely our Christmas. You know, I think I actually posted it on the Facebook group. At the start of the month, I got really excited because TK Maxx had Skull soap dispensers.
I
And I bought a
loved
Skull
that.
soap dispenser and I put it in my sink. And I was like, this is staying here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is when, as a horror fan, and I think everyone that is listening will know this,
Hmm.
we get all the decorations for our flats for all year round.
Right?
It's time for the skulls.
Yeah.
It's time for, I mean, pumpkins. Pumpkins are all the time.
Are you good at carving pumpkins?
I am mediocre at carving pumpkins.
Yeah,
I think
me too.
I think if I result in a good pumpkin, I'm always secretly quite pleased.
Yes.
I think I made a Jack Skellington one that I was particularly chuffed with.
Oh, I mean, you sound like a good pumpkin carver.
Yeah, it's
I
all
can
about
do...
the drawing on
Yes.
first and then...
See, that's what I
yeah.
always forget. I basically just do like the crappy kind of jagged face with the big mouth and the triangular eyes.
Traditional Halloween one,
Traditional
like
Halloween.
traditional.
Exactly.
But just always be glad that you're not doing it in Scotland, where my dad and a lot of Scottish was traditionally you carve turnips, which are a nightmare because they're solid. So,
Yeah.
so he would be like, "No, we're carving the turnips."
Oh,
I was
no.
like, "No, we're carving a pumpkin like everybody else."
Turnips are one of those vegetables. It's like butternut squash. A bit of an effort.
Bit
aren't
of a-
they?
yeah, it's the whole
to
point
peel
of a
them,
pumpkin.
Chop them. Yeah.
Is that you can scoop out the inside. The smell of the inside of a pumpkin is a very unique smell.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah,
It's very
kind of
unique.
deathly.
Yes, but it's all about getting that thickness right as well.
Yes. What do you normally do? Do you have like a Halloween tradition? Do you stay in and watch movies? Do you go out, fancy dress, anything like that?
I think it depends. It always depends what day it falls on, really, doesn't it? But I do always like to watch a lot of movies,
Yeah.
as is the case. I think we've been you were saying you were asked to recommend horror movies. I've been trying to do it on Twitter with a
Yes.
hashtag of its very own, a terrible pun-based Blame Dead recommendation hashtag.
No, I love it, yeah.
But like, it is a movie time. It's a time to settle down. And it's actually a time to enjoy the cold weather, which we haven't been having.
I know, what the hell? I'm
warm.
over it. I'm over summer, to
I'm
be honest.
desperately wearing scarves to try and make it
Please,
colder.
please,
but
God.
Yes, it needs to get colder. But that kind of lovely autumnal light and
Yes,
frosty nights.
yes.
And turning the heating on and being a bit snuggly. And
I know, I love that.
settling
I love that
down.
kind of bonfire-y smell you
Yeah.
get at this time of year as well. Do you have like a particular Halloween movie of choice?
my favourite sort of modern Halloween movie is Trick or Treat.
Yes, me too.
That's
yeah.
so good.
So good.
And
isn't
it's
it?
so good to introduce people to if they've not seen it.
Yeah, it
because
still
I don't mind
feels-
rewatching it.
Yeah, it still feels kind of a little bit relatively unknown. You
Yeah.
know? It should be a bit more of a Halloween classic.
It was
I
weird,
think.
actually. It
Yeah.
should have. I think it went through a lot of sort of production hell, didn't it? And then
did.
it sort of spat out, and no one really watched it. But
Yes, it's the sort of thing now that had it just popped up on Netflix, people would all be talking about it,
Yeah.
wouldn't they? Yeah. Have you had a chance to see the new Halloween movie
Not yet.
Oh.
Tomorrow night.
Yes.
I was at a wedding. How selfish of my friends to
know.
get married on the same day as a Jamie Lee Curtis
I know.
Halloween movie.
Why is
How
it
dare
that
they?
There's been so much shit going on this last week or two. I'm like, do people not know that
Do
there
you
are
know
good
what's
films
happening?
to watch? Yeah. There's too much to watch. We were just talking as well. You're sort of partway into The Haunting of Hill House
Yes.
as well. Is that right?
Yeah, and I've had people saying, I can't believe you've not finished it. It's like, guys, it came out last week.
I know.
You need to understand that when you have one weekend, that's you behind. Done.
Yeah.
You may
yeah.
as well be dead. That's
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got Sabrina as well.
Next week.
Yes.
So that means Haunting of Hill House needs to be out the way before Sabrina.
Yeah, exactly. It's like queuing them all up, isn't it? I've seen the first 2 episodes of Sabrina, and it's good.
It's good.
It's
Good.
good. Yeah,
The
very good.
trailers were positive.
Yes.
And Salem was on the red carpet. Did you see that? It was
No,
amazing.
I didn't know that. That's
no, they
amazing.
had an actual black cat.
That's brilliant. Were you a fan of the 90s Melissa Joan Hart?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Classic.
I think I don't. If people weren't, I don't know what's wrong.
They're lying, probably.
Yeah, they are lying. Because Sabrina was, and Salem in that as well.
Yeah,
Best
amazing.
fake cat of all time.
Yes. He looked kind of quite sort of mangy, didn't he?
Yeah.
That puppet cat. Yeah. It
Like
was
they'd
great.
just not replaced it for a long time.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And he was so bored sounding.
Yes, it's just like they sort of found it in storage or something. Yeah, it was great. But, all this exciting stuff going on. We've had so many new things coming out this month. So it's been like, I've been kind of trying to race to cover them all. And a couple of weeks ago, obviously, there was me thinking I was done with folk horror and thinking, oh, well, that's it now. I've covered pretty much every folk horror.
You.
There's nothing more to cover. And then 1 week later, we had this movie, Gareth Evans' Apostle. So this film just popped up on Netflix a couple of weeks ago. I mean, how do you feel about these movies? How do you feel about Netflix bringing out all these new movies now? Because we just had London Film Festival, and a load of the big kind of potential Oscar contenders have been picked up by Netflix, which means they won't even be getting cinema releases and that kind of thing. I mean, do you miss that about having Netflix in the world?
No, I don't miss the idea of having to go to the cinema to see something, because I think our consumption habits have changed.
Yeah.
I think the fact that we are desperately trying to watch TV in as short a space of time as possible potentially isn't healthy.
Yes.
But I do think that the idea that you can pay for a service, we all pay for Netflix, we all pay for Amazon Prime, and I like the idea that we are paying for a service where we can see fresh things and not necessarily that old film that, that's appeared, we should watch that again.
Yeah.
I like the idea, and I know there's a glorious thing in a cinema experience, and I will love going to see Halloween with lots of people tomorrow night. But I also like the fact that, hey, there's that new thing on Netflix and we can watch it. I loved just knowing that Apostle was there, settling down, pouring a gin and tonic, and enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I think I think we can experience cinema in different ways. And the more of us have 4K TVs, we have great sound setups, we're watching with friends, we're watching with family.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think there's a definite, if you can't, if you're choosing what you're going to spend your £6 or £7 a month on, and you think about how much it costs to go to the cinema and what time you'll get home and all these things. So I think there is still obviously a place for cinema, and a wonderful place. I'm not denouncing it as some kind of awful zillennial, as someone named us the other day. But I do think that our media consumption landscape, to make a wanky term, is absolutely changing. And I like that. I like where horror can live. And I like that we're getting the VOD horror that the States gets, but we're getting it sort of creeping onto Netflix. Because
I love it, yeah.
that keeps happening in the States. They get a horror movie coming out in the cinema, but it also comes out on video on demand at the same time. That's great.
Yeah, and I kind of think it works for a lot of horror as well, because horror can be quite small and intimate, and especially these kind of these Mike Flanagan ones we've been getting on Netflix, like Hush and Gerald's Game, and these kind of, they're all set in a house, or all set in one room, and these kind of movies I think are perfect for popping up on Netflix.
And also it's kind of the fun of that you've got that fun of recommending things to people, or what should I watch on Netflix, and
Creep 2 are like the ultimate discoveries, aren't they?
They're great. They're the kind of movies that you used to be able to find on the videos when you hit play and record at 9 o'clock for one film, and they'd be the film on after it.
Yes.
That's what those are.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
there is a market for those.
Or there'd be one sole copy of one of these movies in the middle of a shelf in Blockbusters, and you wouldn't really have ever heard of it, or it would be in amongst all the new releases. Yeah.
And the thing is, when they're rubbish, as is, have you watched Malevolent?
No, I can't.
Mike?
I remember you telling me about it, and I was like, I am not watching this.
Oh, it was dreadful. It's like a student film, and but not in a good student film way, in a sort of by the numbers. It's very odd, very, very odd. And I find it very odd that Netflix would stick their name happily on that at the same time as who's commissioning that horror.
It's really interesting, that, isn't it? Yeah, because you think a lot of the time they seem to be quite good at kind of filtering good quality stuff, at least,
and finding good things and hiring interesting people, and but
somebody
sadly,
must have known somebody in high places to do with that film, I think.
It's sad because it has I'm sad. It makes me sad.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Apostle then.
Yes,
so also
what we're here
popped
for.
up on Netflix this month.
I dream of a world in which each waking day we rise equal. This island, it's our paradise. We have an intruder on our land. We have to find him.
Your eyes. They've seen things. Who are you?
Well, Apostle is one of those lovely things where it has that nice, simple setup. Man is missing his sister.
Yes.
And goes to island of crazy cult
Yeah.
to find her.
Yes.
And you know the drill. You know how this works. You know what he's going for. So you've got the lovely simplicity of folk horror in that you don't know what you're going into.
Yeah.
Is it nature? Is it people? Is
Yeah.
it the combination of both?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, when he gets to the island, all is not well.
No, exactly.
All is not well, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, like you say, it's the most quintessential folk horror-y set. It sounds like we're describing The Wicker Man.
Yeah,
it's basically
absolutely.
The Wicker Man
Yeah.
in terms of the setup. Not at all in terms of actually how it plays out or the
No.
tone or anything.
No.
But it has that kind of story. So first of all, what did you think of it? Did you enjoy it?
I do enjoy it. Now, this is the first time I've spoken about a movie on this podcast that I'm not absolutely effusive about.
Yes, me too. And this is the only danger with covering new releases sometimes because, they're not classics yet. That's the thing.
No, it's not a classic.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably talk about the number of reasons why it's not a classic. But it is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a proper 7 out of 10 horror movie in
Yeah.
my eyes, which we need more 7 out of 10 horror movies. They're great.
Absolutely.
As horror fans, we have trudged through the 4s and 5s and they've been terrible.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
It's
it really
absolutely gorgeous. I think from the moment there's this wonderful shot of a steam train coming across a bridge.
Yes.
And from that you go, this is beautiful.
Yes.
And you don't feel, and I think it's a thing that folk horror does with us a lot, in the fact that we don't feel safe. And I think Gareth does interesting things with not feeling safe and going beyond our traditional boundaries
Yes.
into extreme darkness and extreme gore. I mean, he made the Raid movies, obviously. He's
that's
not a
it.
stranger to violence and horror in that capacity.
Exactly, yeah. The Raid movies were unbelievable, weren't they? Just amazing feat of kind of choreography, but also the violence was absolutely kind of unflinching, brutal stuff. And we get hints of that in this,
Of
don't
which
we?
I love that hint.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought... We're not allowed to go into spoiler
No,
territory,
we'll go
are
into
we?
spoilers in a bit, but
Okay.
yeah.
There's a moment a little later on, which we will talk about, with the spear, which I thought was especially Raid-like,
Yes,
which
yes.
I thought was going to absolutely change the tone of the whole movie.
Yes.
I thought it was going to maybe go a bit guest.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Another Dan Stevens movie.
Yeah, another Dan Stevens. Yeah, what did you think of Dan Stevens in this?
I like him.
Because I've been reading quite a lot of negative.
Yeah,
He's been getting
people-
quite a lot of flack for this film.
He has, but I thought he was very glowery and
Yeah.
I bought into his horror trope of being an addict,
Yes.
and being damaged and being burned,
Yeah.
and being searching for the light. And I think he calls her the sort of lightness in his life, the one thing that
Definitely.
represents the good in his life is what he's looking for. And I can go into that. I think in the same way as film noirs talk about these damaged detectives, I thought he was that.
Yes.
In every essence,
Exactly.
he looked like that. He was dressed like that.
Yeah.
The very idea of him sort of trudging up in that sort of that coat and everything about him looked downtrodden and addicted and glowery and damaged. And
Yeah.
I liked him.
Yeah,
I do like him.
Totally. And I think it does, it's that classic kind of folk horror thing of it does kind of give you a bit of a kind of nihilistic, bleak view of humanity. And none of the characters are particularly heroic
No.
in any kind of way.
No.
They're all kind of quite flawed, damaged people
They
in some
are.
way or another in
They
this.
are.
And it has that kind of, it does have that kind of inherent bleakness to it, even in
Yes.
the kind of colour palette and stuff.
Yeah, it is muted.
Yeah,
It
it's
is muted.
Exactly, that's the word. Yeah. But yeah, I thought he was good as well.
I like him. I didn't really quite understand. I thought people were being really mean. And I was like, sure, he's looking at us under his eyebrows, but he's on a... You got to embrace where this movie is. You got to accept.
Yeah.
You got to suspend that level of disbelief as the type of character that you're expecting to go here.
Yes.
And maybe you can't. I mean, I can't. Sometimes I find it difficult with, especially with people who are addicts in a certain type of way, and you either... You can't experience it as yourself. You can't put yourself into that, but you can certainly understand them as a character.
Yes.
Sort of Amy Adams in Sharp Objects.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Amazing,
makes
yeah.
you kind of tick a little bit because that's not you, but also it's a believable character.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and there's that slight heightened performance style with all of them, like you get in some of these again folk horror movies, and it weirdly reminded me a much darker version of something like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, or something like the way that these people have kind of cut themselves off from society and created this kind of oldie worldy way of life. And part of it is that it is a bit forced, it is a bit fake, so there's that there is that slight element, I think, to some of their performances where they are over sort of acting that kind of ye oldie kind of style or something.
It wasn't quite as, the language wasn't quite the witch in terms of language, but it was kind of the witch light.
It's the witch light. It is a bit the witch light.
It is a bit the witch light in terms of the language is quite flowery and quite, because of its time period.
Yes.
And it is also slightly alien in the fact that there's the cue when they come back in, sort of checking the health, but then at the same time, you're not sure if they're checking for health or what they're checking for. And suddenly you're in a world that you don't understand its rules. So they can have these theatrical performances. I mean, oh gosh, why is his name going out of my head? Sheen.
Yes, Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen. His standing in that chapel, yes, he was theatrical, yes, he was completely over the top, but he was also utterly compelling in that cult leader kind of way, very Jonestown, he's got these ardent followers, and I was in with all of that. I was in for all of that.
Me too. And I think they set it up at the beginning as I know it is set in early 20th century, I think, isn't it? But they introduce the character of Dan Stevens as living in this kind of more city, kind of urban, place, and
a little bit more forward looking.
There are cars and trains and things like that, and so it's like, okay, now we are like, it's still, even though it's set in the past, it's still in some way going back in time when they go into this island, when they go to this cult.
I suppose when you think about that kind of the rise of industrialization, obviously here, even the type of sort of the train he arrives on, that is the future, and he is then it's a rowing boat at one point. It's not it's very much going backwards. Absolutely going backwards.
It's that feeling of like, it's like the beginning of Shutter Island when they're on that boat sort of heading towards the island, isn't it? It's got that same sort of feel. I mean, I think that's the thing, it's not, I don't think it's going to blow anyone's mind, is
literally.
It really? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. Maybe. But but it's definitely a solid, and maybe that's why maybe Netflix was the best place for it in a way, because it's quite a good night in.
And it's a positive one, as opposed to the Cloverfield, the most recent Cloverfield, which was just a sadness fest. It was just awful, and suddenly you get all this hype about something that's terrible. But Apostle is kind of like the perfect Netflix movie.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that this is would all horror fans enjoy this? I mean, like, who's this for, this film, do you think? I mean, has it got more of the, because it's got more of the kind of hardened stuff in it, I suppose. I find
it very difficult to define, actually. I was tweeting about it after I watched it, and I had a few people that follow me saying, hey, I'm not massively into jump scares, can I watch this? I was like, yes, if you're not into jump scares, but please be aware that if you watch the trailer and you think it looks a bit messy, don't continue to watch it, because it does not fuck around.
It does not,
in any capacity. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, because you have an intelligence sort of set up. You have I wonder what's going to happen. This is all very interesting. What an interesting mystery. And then it gets to a point where it is very much, it is horror.
Yes, exactly.
And that's where the challenge is, because who is that for? Me? You?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who else?
Yeah, I agree.
I couldn't tell my parents to watch that.
No, exactly. That's the thing. And it
I could tell them to watch The Witch, but I couldn't tell them to watch Apostle.
It's doing a lot. Maybe it's trying to do too much. I wonder if that's what the problem is with this film, because it's over 2 hours long.
It's too long,
and it's too long, and it's almost a bit. And we'll go into this in spoilers, but it's almost a bit like two films. It feels like there is a very definite kind of point.
There's a turning point,
like you say, when it then goes into a proper horror,
and in both number of ways, actually, in terms of tone and theme.
Yes, and we've talked about this a lot with folk horror, in that you can kind of get both with folk horror. You can get scary real life, just humans doing horrible things to humans in a sort of cult way, or you can get witches and monsters and folklore and goblins and fairies in the woods and that kind of thing. And again, this movie kind of sort of straddles both in a non. I don't want to spoil things, but it's interesting, and I know what you mean. Again, a difficult film in a way to kind of market or to recommend to certain people,
Yeah.
unless they're us, who will
Yes.
kind of happily embrace any
Yeah.
kind of
Who
horror,
won't-
I suppose.
You know, we wouldn't be the type of people that say, I can't believe you made me watch this, I wanted to throw up.
Yes, exactly.
There are some
exactly.
people that will be like, well, I can't watch that with dinner.
Yes,
No, please
yes.
don't watch it with dinner.
Exactly.
There's many films that I could recommend you don't watch with dinner.
Yeah, definitely. I think Gareth Evans cited movies, obviously, like Witchfinder General
Yes.
as like his kind of
Yeah.
main inspiration for this. And again, you can tell it's got that kind of quite bleak, nasty tone to it. Really,
Yep.
It doesn't. There's not many laughs to be had.
No, there aren't many laughs
If you're looking
to
for a
be had.
fun Halloween romp, I would recommend Halloween probably, and not
Or The Cabin in the Woods.
The Cabin in the
or
Woods,
Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
or Trick or Treat,
Or Trick or
even.
Treat, which is actually nastier every time I watch it than I remember.
It is actually. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
But yeah, Apostle is slightly more. It's slightly more dour, slightly more hardcore
Yeah.
stuff. I
There's-
would say.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess that's to be expected with Gareth Evans. He also
Yes.
did a really good segment of the VHS anthology films. He
Which
did
one was his?
one called Safe Haven in, I think it's VHS 2. He wrote it, but he didn't direct
I
it.
love the VHS.
Do you think Gareth Evans in general has got good sort of chops for horror filmmaking?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so,
I think
yeah.
this might be a warm up.
Yeah, definitely. I would say
Mm.
so because, again, we'll get into this in spoilers, but I think he's good at violence. And I think, for me, he pulled off a couple of genuinely kind of chilling moments.
There were
One that
some
kind
really
of
scary
really put the
moments.
hairs on the back of my neck up.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think, good hats
Yes,
off to
yes,
him. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, amazing. Well, let's get into spoilers then.
The promise of the divine is but an illusion.
God is pain. God is suffering. Beware false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
Let us begin.
So, first of all, what did you think at that moment when, this is the moment I was going to say that creeped me out, but also kind of baffled me, when Dan Stevens is swimming through the kind of river of shit or
Yes,
whatever it is.
under
then this woman just pops up, this kind of witchy woman sort of coming at him and attacking him. And then obviously we find out she is some kind of earthy witch goddess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When that happened, it genuinely felt like one of those Ringu moments of they're coming through the television.
Yes.
It felt like she's not meant to be here. She's not in the version
come
of the
from a
horror
different
movie that I
movie.
was watching.
Yes.
And now she's here and she is real.
Yeah.
Because I think you go, oh, she's in his head. But then you go, why would she be in his head?
Yeah.
That's a real scare, actually. And
was
it's
a proper
horrible.
scare. It
It
really
is
got me,
horrible
that
and it's
did.
claustrophobic
Yeah.
and nasty and wet and horrible.
Yes.
And
even at 8:30 in the morning, that scared me.
Yeah, I bet it
was.
did.
And it was the way that, first of all, he finds an animal or something. It's like
Yeah, he
some
finds
sort
something
of
dead.
half dead, half alive,
the
flapping
sort of
animal.
sacrificial
And
sort
again,
of-
that horrible kind of folk horror imagery of there's lots of dead lambs and
Yes.
slaughtered animals and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. It's all that gross stuff. But then, just this woman popping up, it really creeped me out. It was good. It was
And
effectively done.
the fact, it kind of, some of that reminded me of The Witch a little bit, because
Yes.
obviously the crops are failing.
Yes.
The animals that are being born aren't right.
Yes.
There's death afoot.
Maybe this is the problem with this film, is that it's just not The Witch. It's
That
like you
could be
say,
the
it's The
problem.
Witch light. It's not got that kind of authenticity.
No.
It's a slightly more studio-y
Yes.
The Witch, isn't it, or something?
Yeah. I think there's, but that being said, I did embrace it
I did
as
as
to
well.
what was in the hut.
Yes.
Because it was, I think I wanted it to be something really grim and nasty, human-wise, to be in
Yes.
that hut.
Yes.
I really wanted the idea of the blood sacrifices outside the doors
Mm-hmm,
was particularly brutal, because you kind of like the idea of a cult that has those, that's not feeding them to a goddess
Yes.
that's fueling the crops.
Yes.
That just requires your blood. You'll be
Yes.
happy here. We'll feed you. We'll clothe you.
Yeah.
Open up your arm.
Yeah, and I think
That's scary.
That's certainly scarier. That
Yeah.
the idea of cults really terrifies me
Yeah.
in general. That
Yeah.
kind of
Cults
kind
are
of-
scary.
Cults are
because
really
they are
scary.
real.
Yeah,
Cults are real.
exactly. And so it almost kind of feels like it lets you off the hook a little bit by then going, oh well, there is this kind of
Yeah.
supernatural goddess thing that they are feeding blood to.
Yeah.
But having said that, it still does continue with the theme of really horrible human characters
it absolutely
throughout,
does.
doesn't it?
It
And
does.
especially with that main sort of villain. Is his name Quinn? I
Quinn,
think.
yes.
Yeah. Who turns out to be an absolute monster the more the story progresses, doesn't it? And there's some really nasty stuff with him
I
and
have
his
an
daughter.
with him and his daughter. I think it's Fionn. Her name is.
Yes, that's
and,
right, Fionn, yeah.
Her, I love. Obviously, you see her and her boyfriend together, and you're
Yes.
like, "Well, this is not. You're not getting off this island,
is-
guys.
yeah, this
is
doesn't bode
doomed.
well,
You're
yeah.
basically cult Romeo and Juliet at
Yes,
this point.
exactly
Like, you
that.
are doomed.
Yeah.
I'm not putting anything of my because they were very sweet and it was lovely, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're on this boat and you want to build a house out of the
Yeah.
boat. I know that's so lovely. You're never going to get there.
Yeah.
And I was almost upset, and this is not because I wanted to see violence against women, but you didn't see him kill his daughter.
No, that was an interesting choice.
She was just a dead thing on the floor.
Yeah.
1 minute he was being, you can't have this, and you can almost, obviously before he kills her, you know why he's angry, and it's because he's seen the things that are born on that island. Because the things that are born on that island are not
Are born wrong.
are born wrong. They are basically demonic
Yes.
devil things that aren't right.
Yes.
So he knows that. Obviously it's going over the top to be the complete awful human villain that he is.
Yes.
But you could understand at that point.
Yes.
And I almost wanted to embrace his villainy by seeing what an awful human being he was. Instead, she actually just becomes this bloodied accessory that two men then fight over.
Yes, you're right.
And that's... it bothered me. And I couldn't tell you why it bothered me, and I still can't really tell you why it bothered me, but it bothered me in a way that suddenly it became two men having a fight.
Yes, it
With a
did.
dead girl on the floor.
That you
And she
see
was
for about a second
Yeah.
in the background.
in the
almost.
background covered in
Yeah.
blood. Well,
Yeah.
that's her now, and it's not. And I don't want us to be like, oh, it's not about the fact that it's a woman that's died or any of these things, but it's just about that was a very odd choice.
Yeah, considering she was quite an important character up until
where
that
she
point.
at that point was literally just binned.
Yeah.
And wasn't binned on screen.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of horror in that movie. We saw a man, we'll talk about it in a minute, we saw a man have a corkscrew inserted in his skull.
Yes.
It's not that Gareth Evans wanted us not to see violence, because he loves it when we see violence. So why was that?
Why was that?
Why was that?
Do you
Why?
think that was him trying to just not show violence against women? I mean, his films, all of his films, are filled with violence against men, but
Yeah.
not women. Weirdly,
Yeah. Meanwhile, by the very act of leaving
Yes.
someone dead on the floor, you're actually bringing more attention to the
Yes.
fact that you've, we watch. I haven't watched Halloween yet, but I imagine it's probably equal opportunities in terms of slashing.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of female babysitters.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
There's got to be, because
Yeah.
we have watched people, men and women, and we've both read Men, Women and Chainsaws.
Yeah.
We have read, we have experienced that. So
Yeah.
not experiencing here in the very idea that women are quite rare in terms of characters in this, it's very much about men. The one female character who we watched die, is just left on the floor.
You're right. You're totally right. It was a very weird choice. I thought that too. I was like, oh, she's just suddenly
dead.
And I thought, was there something went wrong technically? Did they have to cut it? Did something not? I don't
even
know.
seeing, I feel weird saying I want to see her die. I did.
Yeah.
She was, we make connections with these characters, and although the fact that we say, oh, I don't want to connect to you because you're going to die, the whole point of watching a film is that we connect with them. We watch them live.
Yeah.
And then when we watch them die, we feel something when they are released. I mean, it's awful. That's a weird thing to say.
No,
but
yeah, you're
we
totally
watch them
right.
die. We watch the light leave their eyes, and
Yeah.
that's our exit.
Yeah.
We didn't get that with her. We didn't get that death closure. We saw her left.
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
a very odd treatment of a character.
Yeah, it was very weird, wasn't it? I did really like the other female character. There's basically only two. The other one, who was the Michael Sheen's daughter,
Andrea, yes.
Andrea. She
Yeah.
was very good,
And
yeah.
she was, I like her. She was sassy and
Yeah.
talked back to, it's Thomas.
Thomas. Yes, yeah.
Talked back to him and was very sweet and charming, and I
Yeah.
quite liked her flirtatiousness, despite the fact that they were obviously in a place where that was not allowed.
Yeah,
I liked all of that
exactly.
so much.
And she was definitely the most inherently kind of moral and likable character
Yes.
in all of this.
And the
in
fact
a
that
way.
she brought down food and
Yes,
a blanket, and
yes.
that was a moment of nice humanity amidst the madness.
So, what do you make of what this actual thing is? Is it that this is genuinely a goddess who is... Because the thing I find weird about it is if she is some sort of god or deity or goddess, they've basically got her tied up and they're prisoner.
Yes, well, that's why she's cursed them.
Yes,
That's what I decided.
But is it just that it's a witch? I mean, it's weird that she's supposed to be a god, isn't
Yeah.
it? In a way.
But I like the idea of the fact that an island could have a natural god that comes
Linked
with
to
the
the
island,
land and-
because there were all those pieces of art, weren't there, around the
Yes.
that are that show that's this going back probably centuries, where this
Yes.
god was brought to the sacrifices and blessed them with bountiful harvests.
Yes.
And that was how it worked. But instead, Quinn was like, "Hey, we should harness this," and basically fastened her
Yeah.
and forced her and force fed her
Yeah.
and abused her. And the idea that it's the humans that are still the problem when there's an all-powerful god.
Yes,
and,
yes, yes.
and a god that took... There was that wonderful shot of the soldiers or whoever they were in the trees. And that was just almost an afterthought, because this is a
Yes.
god. This is an angry god.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, yeah.
And I harnessed vengeful god. And I like the idea that this island could have these. And obviously we're spoiling the end
Yeah,
now, right?
yeah, yeah.
Obviously he becomes the next one.
Yeah, is that what it is? Is
I
that
think
what
so.
it is?
Because
Yes, that's
that
what-
weird, he gets that weird eye thing,
He
doesn't
does,
he?
he does. And he
they grow-
kind of almost becomes one with the soil and the
yeah,
earth. at
and
the
you hear
end.
her saying,
Yes, she
"You,
says...
I've been waiting for you, my son."
Yes, well,
so
that's what-
literally, he's the next one.
That's what it is. Yeah, I didn't get that, and I was about to ask you why was it she said that to him, because I didn't know whether that ending of him lying there dead and the grass all kind of coming back to life was just that it was like, oh, it's another blood sacrifice, basically.
I
Giving,
think it's a little darker than that, in that he's
there
the new
now.
one.
Huh. Interesting.
Because
yeah.
Because her father's still there.
Yes.
Sheen is still there. He could have another island of crazy people
Yeah.
feeding the god.
Yeah.
But although it wasn't him by the end, that wasn't his goal.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you say, it's an interesting kind of microcosm of like, look, you've got this actual god, but look how much human beings can still fuck each other
Yeah.
over.
Ah,
and
look what you've done.
Complete idiots, overlook the whole thing, basically.
Yeah, because Quinn basically threatens the two women.
Mm.
Because he says, "This is my island now.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to make you make babies. And then we're
Yes.
just going to feed your babies to my pet god."
Yes,
And
yeah.
it's like, oh, you're worse than we thought.
I know.
You're actually the worst.
Yeah, and because the Michael Sheen character in the end, he's kind of he's not an inherently good character, I suppose, but he's kind of, I suppose he's just more of a kind of weak character. I
Yeah,
suppose,
he's not a
isn't
complete
he?
and utter bastard
No,
like Quinn.
No,
Well, do you know who we haven't talked about?
Mm.
The Grinder.
the Grinder. Who's the Oh, yes. What's that about? The guy who has like kind of weird some sort of roots around his face,
like
his head,
the
or
creature
something.
that
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of Silent Hill.
It did feel a bit Silent Hill.
It was
and
very Silent
There was
Hill.
something about him that was almost like kind of like a folk horror version of some sort of sadomasochism.
Yeah, he was a
gimp
little
type
gimpy.
character.
He was
Yeah.
a bit gimpy.
Yeah, he was a
He
folk
was a bit
gimp.
gimpy.
Yeah.
The folk gimp. Bring out the folk gimp. Oh no.
Again, this was all a bit much at 9 in the morning, but
Yeah.
yeah, the folk gimp and that actual that grinding moment was really truly, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, he lost some fingers there.
Yeah. There's
Yeah, that
something
was
about
all-
that imagery of like fingers kind of hanging off.
It's
and
that
squashed
physicality,
and-
isn't
yeah,
it? It's
yeah.
we've all got fingers.
Yes, exactly.
And we all kind of when it's people getting sliced in two, sure, we've got two parts that can be sliced.
But,
into. But when you got fingers,
You can't relate. That's the thing. Not that I can relate to going through a grinder, but when you trap your finger in a door, it really fucking hurts, and
Yeah,
it's that
yeah.
times 10, isn't
Yeah,
it? That's
it's
the
that
thing.
times
It's-
literally times 10.
Yeah,
10
exactly.
individual poor little guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the grinder that's literally there to grind up the humans, turn them into baby food, and feed them forcibly
Yes.
into the trapped goddess. This is a strange film.
It is a strange film, and actually, the one thing I could say about it in a positive way is that once all this crazy stuff started to happen, I had no idea where this
Nope.
movie was taking me, and I genuinely believed at that moment, oh, Dan Stevens is going to die. I thought he could just get written off at
Yeah.
this point, like the other poor Theon did,
Yes,
and
yeah.
countless other things just suddenly happen and change and switch. So I was
Yeah.
like, I just don't know where this is going at all.
It's really to be applauded, the fact that this is all sitting on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you just hit play on that on Netflix, and all of a sudden you're watching a guy being opened up with a corkscrew.
Yes.
That scene, the approach of that
it's
corkscrew.
horrible, and I felt really sorry for that poor sweet
that
boy.
Poor
as well.
boy. That poor boy.
Yeah.
That poor boy that was just a bit sweet and
Yeah,
innocent.
yeah.
And then he just had his head caved in with a really spiky thing.
Ooh, and then they like put something in his
Yeah, like the petal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be cleansing him.
That'll help.
That's what they...
Don't
when a
worry,
plaster
mate. We'll
won't
give
do.
you that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was grim.
Yeah.
That was... And all of that was in the trailer. The suggestion of all of that was in the trailer.
It was.
Which
it really
isn't-
played on all that.
It did.
Would you have preferred it had it been like the trailer in a way kind of suggested that it was not all in the name of some god or some supernatural thing, but this was just a crazy cult doing this kind of thing to people?
Yeah, I think the trailer had to do that.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
like that we had a bit of a bait and switch on that, actually.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that kind of thing really bothers me, but it didn't with this one. Actually,
No.
I was quite happy to embrace the kind of weird, creepy witch.
I think that's where the division will be.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think that's where people will go, I really don't like this film.
Mm-hmm,
And it's either your personal preference and that you don't like being taken into a supernatural realm,
Yeah.
or you don't like being cheated. Because
Yes.
it does feel a little cheaty. What's going on in there? This is a mystery.
Yes.
It's kind of like when something happens and then, people blame ghosts at the end and you go, well, that was terrible because it blames ghosts.
Exactly.
There's correct ways to do these things and there's
Yeah.
wrong ways. And I don't think it did it wrong, but I do think there'll be personal preferences of people who will not be willing to go along that part of the ghost train.
Yeah,
Which
I
is
agree.
fine.
And I think maybe for me it was just the fact that the reveal worked for me quite in just such a creepy way. It was just such a creepy reveal when we saw this terrifying
it was
woman
really scary.
that I was like, oh, this got me. Yeah, there was the first moment of the film where it wasn't just gross out stuff, but actual kind of pure uncanny fear at that moment, like proper horror.
But
like
you
say.
saw her quite early on.
Yes.
The idea of the supernatural was actually quite early on with the moss burning on the side of the house.
Yes,
So
that's
there was
true.
like a zoom out of
That's
that and
true.
it burned and I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
and then,
that's true.
slightly later, when he had dropped the blood on the floor,
Yes.
the blood kind of sucked along the wood.
That's right. Yeah, it did.
And I think there was something under the floorboards,
Yeah.
which could have been her.
There's some weird stuff. That's true. They do kind of
creeping
hint
about
at
like
it.
blood Santa.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, instead, who needs milk and cookies? We've got gallons of blood. Do you know what I found very funny?
Yeah.
When he was stealing the blood from the people opposite.
Oh,
they
yeah.
had... They did not mess around in what they emptied into their glass. Gosh, there must have been a few of them open up my vein because he just sloshed that in.
I know.
It was like Ribena
Yeah, it was all over the place.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll have a little bit of this then. It's like, gosh. I mean, if you had me do that outside, it was like, oh, squeeze out 2 more drops of blood and then that'll be it. That's all you're getting.
Yeah, it was
But instead,
really.
there was a proper half bucket out
It
there.
really, it's true. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's just quite an icky
It is
film
icky.
in a way.
It is
wasn't
icky.
It?
It's really icky. It's icky in many ways.
I'm really not good with like animals giving birth as well. I'm not, the way that they have to kind of like yank them. Oh, I always kind of makes my sort of stomach swirl a bit, and that like
This is
scenes
Mike
like
of
that.
the evolution of horror having problems with that.
I can't do that kind of thing. There was another folk horror film. What was it that we talked about? Wakewood. I don't know if you've ever seen Wakewood. There's a lot of gross, icky animal shit in Wakewood,
I took that just for that opportunity to drink some coffee. That's why I sound like this.
and kind of things giving birth to things in
Yes,
that movie
Wakewood
that I
isn't-
did not care for.
No,
I didn't care
there's a
for
lot
it.
of birthing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not good with that kind of thing. But yeah, so overall, I kind of all that stuff I was all for. It kind of affected me in the way that I'm sure it was supposed to affect
Yeah.
me. That's the thing. It's just a little bit uneven, I suppose.
What
That's
would
the
we
main
have
thing.
chopped out of it is the thing.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's
'Cause
true.
In order to get all that batshit crazy stuff and to build the idea that you don't think it's something supernatural and to have there was some great chase sequences when you thought that he was going to get caught.
Yes.
And he almost shot his friend and all of those.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the banter between those 3 leaders.
Yeah.
I love the idea of these 3 men arriving on an island. And I love the creation of the cult.
Yeah.
And one of them being, oh, we can do this. And the other 2 kind of going along with it
Yeah.
and thinking this is the future of humanity. Like, I like all of that. So I suppose it appeals to me in all these small parts.
Yeah, definitely. You can see
But-
there's so many good ideas there. And again, this idea of like this woman being this, this god of this island, and then 3 men coming and basically fucking the whole thing up.
Just
and
screwing it over
Yeah,
entirely.
yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be... Humans are always the worst.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that there's gods that can throw men into trees.
Mm-hmm.
The humans are still the problem.
Exactly.
Wherever we go, we just mess everything up.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of interesting ideas there. What was the moment you said you liked the spears?
So I thought that he could have, because he did that. He was escaping from the two guys, and he embedded the spears, and there was this kind of like super fast.
Yeah, that was great.
Which was brilliant, and I thought, I could do a bit more of that.
Yeah, definitely.
But then I could just watch the raid.
You just watch the raid. But yeah, there are so many moments, he's just very good at violence overall, basically. He's very good at doing violence. The kind of fight scenes that happen in the house towards the end, after the daughter's death, a lot of kind of smashing heads against things and quick
really
cuts and
crunchy.
kind of close-up kind of visceral crunchy is the word exactly. Like, again, very raid-esque kind of violence, which I always quite enjoy, to be honest.
And I like the branding.
He
was obviously, he was preaching Christianity in a country that didn't want it, and that was the imagery around that, the colour of that as well, the fire of that particular memory, I very much enjoyed. I kind of loved that about him. He was this broken, scarred man, like that huge crucifix on his back. That was all great. That all bought into the imagery entirely. So all these little bits are great.
It isn't quite the sum of its parts, almost, is it?
We like the parts, the little
like
juicy
the parts. There's interesting stuff to unpick, and I will give it a second watch at some point as well. I feel like it's going to be a film that will stay with me. There's certain imagery in this film that will stay with me.
So I only watched it. It was only a week and a half ago. I watched it for the first time, and then I started to rewatch it last night.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
And I was like, I've seen this recently enough.
Do you know what? I can't do this.
I'm fine. I have a lot of other things to watch. And I remember this perfectly. Thank you. Turns out some of it is seared into my mind.
Well, that's it.
There's
Branded,
particular
you might say.
You could say.
Or drilled into your
drilled
mind.
into my retinas.
So, overall, kind of good.
We like it. That's what makes it sound terrible.
I know.
It's not fine. It's better than fine.
It is better than fine.
And it's got moments of absolute thrilling, exhilarating horror.
Yes.
Graphic horror.
Yes.
Unique, interesting horror, but perhaps somewhat uneven in tone.
Yes.
And feel.
Yes.
But yes, watch it on Netflix.
Yeah.
If all of that hasn't convinced you,
nothing to lose really than to watch it on Netflix.
Just watch it. I mean, it's 2 hours. Which is actually a lot of valuable time now that there's all these hill houses and everything else to watch.
It's true.
So yes, it is saying that it is good enough that you should definitely
check it out. Amazing. Louise, thank you very much for joining me once again.
Me.
If people want to come find you, find your recommendations, that kind of thing, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter, shiny_demon, which currently is the Texas Blainsaw Massacre.
Very good. I love a good October spooky name. Amazing. Thank you very much. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening, and a big thank you once again to the brilliant Louise Blain. So, what do you think of Apostle? What are your thoughts? I know it's divided a lot of people. Some people love it, some people not so keen. Me and Louise, as you could tell, we're sort of somewhere in the middle there, but generally positive. Get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and on Letterboxd @evolutionpod. You can find us on Instagram @the Evolution of Horror, and on Facebook. That's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And if you want, please do come and join the discussion group where you can discuss the movie, you can discuss any horror-related matters with fellow listeners. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and that can be found on Facebook. That's it for now. Join us very soon for another Shocktober edition of the Evolution of Horror.